today in the heart of the park with Geof Benson.
Hi, thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good. So the topic of today, because I have interviewed Nancy Schwab, who talked about the assault on the opposite side of the road from her house and her fear about the house falling in the lake. And then I talked to Ed Bracken about all the work that he did. And I understand that you were actually head of the town council when the issue of what to do about our road along the lake and protecting it surfaced.
So I think Donna was town council president when Hutchinson happened.
Yes.
And that's when it all started. But then with the new council, yeah, we were sworn in and kind of handed this event.
Yes. Baptism by fire or something like that.
Absolutely.
Tell me what happened from your point.
So from my point of view, what happened was that this has happened before, and it's been fixed before several times. And the most recent time, I think, was in the 80s and 90s. And they'd put rock to protect places when the water was high. Even Lakeview, the Red Lantern went away, and later they built Lakeview. And then even later than that, they put rocks in front of it to keep it from falling in. And so what happened was when they did that, there was homeowners, originally, there was homeowners that were trying to protect their home using different materials, using steel seawalls and concrete seawalls.
And that was all on the lake side of the road, right?
Correct, yep. And but the Army Corps didn't put rocks in front of those because they were working. And so they'd stop and start their big armor rock wall. And what happened in November of 2019 was we had about 5 days around Thanksgiving that were very stiff winds out of the north for 5 days straight. And it took enough of a pounding that at Hutchinson, it washed all the sand out behind a concrete steel seawall, and then that collapsed. And when that collapsed, it opened up access to the dune behind it, to the lake, and there was nothing to protect it, and it started disappearing really fast. We lost 30, 40 feet of dune that was, again, probably between 25 and 40 feet high in a couple of days. And so we were able to, on an emergency basis, fix Hutchinson. And then what happened as the council changed was the storms continued, and basically just about every place where there was an existing seawall where the Corps did not put armor stone in front of it, they were all failing.
And
so
the armor wasn't in front of it because the people who owned the houses had done their own sort of revetments, right?
Right. And then the leases expired, the park removed the houses, but they didn't do anything about the seawalls. They just left them, but no one maintained them or did anything else. And so there was a whole bunch of them that were breached in about a 4-month period.
And that's when those scowls began to happen, which were around those revetments.
Yep. Right. Because the revetment was trying to break up the energy of the waves, and it was cutting into the sand behind it. And so it was going very quickly. Yeah, in front of Nancy's house, there was, as everything eroded, you saw all the old parts of the house that they didn't excavate, and that was kind of ugly. But more importantly, the sand was just disappearing daily. It was very scary. Yep.
Right. And so What happened?
What happened? so, most of it was almost all of it was on the national park property. And we talked to them, and they said they didn't have any money, and they just let the lake do what it's going to do.
Right.
And we tried talking sense into them. We talked to the county commissioners. They came out and looked at the place, and they brought their engineer out and took some drone footage. But that was it. They said they might, if we asked them, they might loan us money, but we'd have to pay it back. We asked the state. We tried to get the state to declare an emergency, and they wouldn't. And we tried ganging up with all the other communities that were facing this similar erosion problems. And
like Ogden Dunes and Dune Acres and places like that. Mm-hmm.
And Porter and Michigan City and Long Beach. Yep. All of those, and even the hardened structures in like Hammond and Whiting, they were facing problems as well. But so we were having meetings trying to gather all the troops together to make a bigger force. And then Ogden Dunes filed a federal lawsuit against the National Park, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Department of Interior. And so that kind of shut down a lot of things. It shut down the communications. It made the park have to follow very strict rules. So we fixed the Hutchinson on a handshake. And then after that, we couldn't do anything until we could get a special use permit and go through all the process of that. So we, while we were doing that, we talked to them because at Lakeview, just past the building, the erosion on that end of Broadway, on the west end of Broadway, was getting really, really bad. And what they said that we could do was this sandbag thing. That is, we would buy these giant accordion sandbags and put sand in them and try that. And so we found the manufacturer, got them there, paid for them, paid for all the sand to be delivered.
Remember what a cause that was.
And we did that, and they helped. They got all that in, and then the first storm just decimated it, took it away. And they decided that the manufacturer said that they didn't do it right. And so they said, we'll give you the sandbags to do it right, and we'll oversee it. And so they came back, and we got some, and they started trying to redo it the right way. And they were going to do more layers and taller. And they got a lot of it done. And then a storm came and took all that away. And it just disappeared, except for the black, fabric that the sandbags were made from. So it was really...
Nature is amazing.
It was, and one of the reasons they said that is they wouldn't let us treat that area the same way because there wasn't armor stone there, is what they said. And so we could only do it with sand. But as it all eroded away, it uncovered the armor stone that actually was there. And so then they changed their mind and said that we could do that, and finally. But a year ago today, April 30th, so that would be April 30th, 2020, the parking lot and part of the road fell into the lake.
I remember.
Because the erosion continued and it kept going, and it fell in. And so that was, that sort of helped our cause of trying to, to
get them to see reason.
Sort of. So when it went away, it exposed the sewer pipe that goes from the Lakeview to the Dunbar, and so they decided that it wasn't safe for it to be exposed, so they cut it off and capped it and closed the bathrooms. And then it appeared that as we started, we were beginning to start construction because we had in the meantime, negotiated a special use permit, and at the same time started seeking bond money, because we also, in February, I went to Washington, D.C. and to beat up our senators and congressmen, but that didn't work. And in January, I'd been in Indianapolis beating up the governor and the head of the Homeland Security, which controls FEMA, and I gave him a personal tour of the shoreline, and they wouldn't declare it an emergency. And so the town, what we had to do was be creative with our financing and find a way to borrow enough money to do it ourselves. And so we negotiated a $5 million bond, and that worked out very well with low interest rates, and we were able to amortize it in a way that the residents' taxes, none of us will feel a bump, because our payments will stay low until our other bond is paid off in a few years, and then this will take its place. And so we won't feel, we'll still be paying, but we won't for longer, but not more in any one year. And so we then got started working on some of the areas. It was really hard to get the rock, because the quarries weren't, because now we were in a pandemic, and there was all kinds of problems. But the residents were volunteering to, manage the traffic with these big trucks and bulldozers and excavators, and then what we were trying to put out fires. As far as where the worst erosion was, we were trying to at least put some rocks there to help to slow it down until we could get to it. And we switched gears to Lakeview to do that first, because the road was actually falling in the lake. And the other places we might still have 20 or 30 feet of sand. And so we were measuring the temperature of what was the hottest spot and then trying to do work there. And so we did Lakeview when they changed their mind and let us replace the land that had just been eroded away, which would have included the parking lot. And as we were doing that, then we asked them if they wanted to reconnect their sewer line before we buried it. And they said no, that they'd just do that later. And then they said, but if you want to, then maybe you should, which was just sort of crazy. But they ended up paying for it through a circuitous route. But we have ways, and they ended up paying for the sewer connection to be redone, and then we filled that in and finished it. But once we secured that area, they did a gorgeous job there in D&M excavating, but they contoured the sand and everything. And then we left Lakeview and went down to in front of Nancy's house to do that, because then that was the next hottest area. And as we worked on those, the more you're down there, the more you see the other weaknesses, and so the process grew. So I had to change our permitted areas, because we tried to get people to make the maps for us, and they just couldn't or didn't have time. So I ended up having to make all the maps for the permitting, and it was just on Google Earth, and then selecting areas, and it gives you the measurements and everything, and then that's our engineering drawings for our where we're allowed to work. And we had to change those dimensions a few times, amend the agreement, but we did, and it grew. But they went from kind of by Nancy's house all the way down to Underwood eventually, but we didn't do that all at once. We had to go down and do some of the east end and put out fires there, and then come back. And so Ed was managing the riprap, which is the rock about this big, the armored stone, which is like your kitchen table, and then the sand, and having to, the supply chain, the trucking, and the, all of that he was managing. And we ended up I think he must have gone. We have accounts with I think 5 or 6 different quarries.
Yeah, well, he was really astute about those quarries, because one quarry delivered not so great stuff, and he said he ended up getting them to re-deliver without charging us any more money, and to pay us back for the first delivery for the trucks. That's amazing.
Yeah. And he made them pick up every rock and drop it before they put it in a truck so that it would pass the drop test.
The amazing thing is, I remember there was one guy who was working for D&M who went and did a certain area, and then Ed went back and took one look at it and said it wasn't done right. So he made him come back and do it exactly like. There's a skill to that is just astounding.
It really is, and just looking at it, you don't see it, but they're keyed. All those rocks are keyed so they won't move, so they're kind of locked in, and that's what they didn't do right, and he made them come back. Yeah. That was in front of Peg Overly's, so they'd backed out, they'd done the matting and everything, and we had a storm, and it took 3 rocks, and Ed said, nope, come back, bring it back, redo it, and so that was
lucky to have him, and we are so lucky to have you. I just think you've been an amazing leader and a dog on the bone in terms of trying to get not only this done, but lots of other things. And I think it's been amazing how this town is pulled together about this. I regard that as a gift for Beverly Shores.
It has taken a village. It really has. You count up all of the volunteers, and all the harassment that they had to withstand from mean bicyclists and also, mean drivers and belligerent
but I think
people.
The bicyclists were the worst.
I think so, but. Trying to manage the traffic for safety, and that was all volunteer. That saved a ton of money, and it was every day for a long time. That was 7 months of, and Ed worked 6 days a week, and he really would even work the 7th, but he would be refueling and things, but. We were very, very lucky to have him.
We're lucky because I don't know there's a day that goes by when he doesn't go down to check.
Right, I know, he really does.
Unlike when the Army Corps of Engineers came in the 80s, they did their thing and it was all done right, and that was great, and it lasted, 20, 30 years? But now we have somebody in town who's like a hawk on this stuff, and I think this will last a lot longer just because of that.
I sure hope so. And there's a couple spots that we didn't put, that in the thermometer they were low enough temperature that we left them alone. They may surface later, hopefully not, but
we'll know about it.
Yes, we will. And we've really come a long way, and I think the park was good to let us do all this, and that Army Corps permit that we're getting now, because they came back and said that we had to get a permit because we put some stuff in below the ordinary high water mark, because they changed the ordinary high water mark and we didn't know. So anyway, just more paperwork and stuff. We'll be okay. But the park is aware of our partnership and how we are scrappiness, and that we, because we protected their land and ours and public infrastructure, and on our dime, and all they had to do was give us permission. And conversely, Ogden Dunes is still in federal court with them, and it will probably go on for a couple more years, which is costing hundreds of thousands of dollars without, what do you get for it,
Well, I think that we owe to your common sense, frankly.
Well, I don't want to be in court with them. They have way more attorneys than we do.
Yeah.
So, but we are, it's holding up. And I really think that, you know, Ed was trained to do this back in the 70s, and we took his training manual as the guidebook, because he's done it, he knows how to do it, and it was Army Corps training, and so that's what we used to give back to them to, you know, justify this. And that has lasted, like you said, a long time. And so, and if you go down to Windsor and look at it, you see this beautiful sand dune with marram grass, and it's rolling, in a ford dune, and then the beach. And if you were to dig down there, you would find it is all armor stone. And it looked like the East End, basically. And that's all been Yep, because Ed did it. So they went all the way down to Durham and to I think to Windsor, and then stopped, because they were fighting with George Bagnell at the time, I think. And so Sally said that they wouldn't put rock in front of his house, and so they stopped at Windsor. So, to me, that's the hopeful part, is that you see that and you have no clue that there's rock under there. And that's the way Lakeview was, and that's the way Shore, you know, and Underwood, all those places that are just solid rock that we didn't put there, are uncovered, and they used to be all covered with sand and plants. And so as the lake goes down, the sand will come up and it will cover that stuff up again, because that's how it gets there.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah. That's all we can hope for, is that, and that's what kept me going, is that looks so good and so natural. But it is a cycle, and you know, we just have to hold this stuff up. And the other thing is, this road, it is a public road, and it is the only place that you can drive next to the lake.
That's right.
Nowhere else. And so if that fell in, then there'd be no place.
Well, thank you very much for chatting with me, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much.
From the heart of the park, Geof Benson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzy.